Welcome to the HR Data Labs podcast, now part of the Work Defined Podcast Network. Join us as we explore the vital role of compensation, strategy, data, and people analytics in navigating today's complex business world. With the resources of Work Defined, we're bringing you deeper insights and actionable ideas from top HR experts. Now, here are your hosts, David Turetsky and Dwight Brown. Hello and welcome to the HR Data Labs podcast. I'm your host, David Turetsky, and we have an exciting show for you today. We have Harris Ikram and Chad Atwell from CandorIQ. Hello, gentlemen.
Hello, David.
How are you?
We're doing well. Yeah.
There you go.
Great.
There you go. Harris, why don't we start with you? Give us a little bit about your background.
Sure. Harris, founder, CEO at CandorIQ. Before this, I've had a career in not in compensation and not in headcount planning. I had a career as an operator leader, running product and engineering teams at unicorns like Checker, Blend, Salesforce, and spend a lot of time on this.
Oh,
but some other things about me: immigrated to the U.S. 20 years ago.
Welcome.
Speak 4 languages. Been in 25 countries at least. Last time I counted. And if I'm slightly inebriated, maybe my accent gets heavier, but. Not into college football, but love the NBA.
Okay, so would you like a drink? Is that what you're saying?
It's 8 o'clock, maybe by noon at my time.
Okay, all right, that's fine. And Mr. Atwell.
Hi, everybody. Chad Atwell. So my career really spans all different aspects of compensation, but I've essentially always been in this space as a practitioner early on in my career here locally in the Denver area in Colorado, and then consulting, and from there back and forth between consulting and technology companies similar to CandorIQ, but I've spent time with Oracle and Lattice and others, really essentially building out how compensation is delivered as much as it is how it's designed for a lot of these companies. And workforce planning has always been a real passion of mine as well, and kind of seeing how, especially in the compensation space, we work with finance people quite a bit on budgets and that sort of thing. And so that's a lot of my background.
And Chad and I have known each other for decades because when I worked for ADP, we were doing a project together for what used to be called HRXML and then became something else.
Something else.
We were working on the compensation project together, and we did some really cool schemas. So
yeah,
we had fun. Lots of years in that.
Lots of years. Yeah. Thank you for having us, David, too. Appreciate it.
My pleasure. My pleasure. We're going to get into that. But before we do, as you all know, what's the one fun thing? Harris, we're going to start with you. What's the one fun thing that no one knows about Harris?
Maybe some people know, but I used to do stand-up comedy as an amateur, and did that in Chicago while I was in school. I wasn't that very funny. That's why I'm building HR software. But I did do that.
Most comedians have a day job because they usually, especially in the starting times, can't support themselves. So
yeah, that's me.
That's cool. I would love to have done that. Too old now. So.
It's never too late.
Never too late? I don't like starring.
It's the energy. You're funny. You just need the energy to get up on stage. That's what it is.
Yes. Yeah. This episode sponsored by Geritol. Geritol every day. I'm kidding. It's not sponsored by Geritol. No. Sorry, Chad. What's the one fun thing that no one knows about you?
I've actually been a barbecue judge for quite a while, over a decade now, and there is an actual certification for a barbecue judge that you have to go through. It's probably one of the lowest bars you could probably think about that you have to jump over, but I judge barbecue with local competitions. I've been to Memphis in May, which is a huge international competition that happens in Memphis every May. And so it's a blast. It's a lot of fun. It's a good excuse to get out on the road and have a road trip and go visit some different areas that we wouldn't.
And eat a lot of barbecue.
And eat a lot of good barbecue. Yeah,
that's right. Wow. Yeah. Wow. Again, I'm so jealous of you, Chad. Yeah. And that just doubles it down right there. Well, now that we know so much about both of you, now we can get into our topic. And our topic for today is one that if you've been in the compensation space or you've been in HR or you're in finance, you probably care a little bit about. What we're going to try and do today is try and make it a little bit more important for you, because every organization needs good workforce planning, but there's usually a tension between HR and finance about that workforce planning and who's providing the data and how it happens. So what we're going to talk about today is, how does workforce planning happen where HR and finance can work together more appropriately?
Hi, we're Meg and Amy from The Meg and Amy Show.
We're not only tech execs and big picture thinkers, we're also best friends.
We're curious learners. And on this podcast, we're challenging the status quo and activating the future.
And we're going to give advice about work and leadership, right, Meg?
You know, we can't help ourselves. But this podcast is about exploring possibility, not being right.
That sounds refreshing.
For more, tune in to The Meg and Amy Show.
Gentlemen, the first question is, compensation and headcount planning are often treated as very separate silos in an organization, but they're really intertwined, obviously, for lots of reasons. So why is it that HR and finance teams don't collaborate, and why is it important that they do collaborate on these two areas for overall business success?
Yeah, I'll start on that. So, I mean, I've been in HR my entire career. I've seen a lot of different types of HR teams and finance teams, as I mentioned before. And the way that they work is often driven by different objectives first, right? So finance has a very cost focus, whereas HR is a little bit more progressive. They're trying to really develop talent and make sure that, even to the extent of overhiring in some cases, where you're trying to grow the business through the talent that you need and that sort of thing. And finance is, continually coming in and trying to talk about budget and that sort of thing. And so right off the bat, there's a lot of differences between their two approaches.
Right.
And systems, oddly enough, don't really help with that as well. So systems, you think about your HRIS systems and your finance systems, like those are all things that enforce the fact that the HR team mostly tracks and manages employee headcount, and finance very often through the procurement function are tracking contractors and consultants and other things as well. And so you very rarely get an opportunity to kind of cross over and have that really important conversation about total workforce planning or workforce management, which you have to now stitch together a bunch of different spreadsheets and all the other things that kind of go along with it. You only do it once a year, and essentially it just gets put on a shelf at that point for a lot of organizations, and nobody really looks at it at that point. So yeah, there's just so many kind of built-in disconnects between the two groups that it's pretty rare to actually find an organization where that CHRO CFO relationship is really, really well developed and they go through this on a regular basis. Like, you just don't come across that very often.
I think you mentioned this, Chad, and this goes back to a lot of the days that when you and I used to talk about data and data governance. But HR is dealing with people. They're dealing with butts and seats, whereas really the finance organization is caring about cost and the counting of those seats. A lot of times, especially when I was a practitioner, I would get called into the CFO's office and talk about cost. And I was dealing with annual salaries. I was dealing with bonuses. I was dealing with overtime. I dealt with a lot of things. And they just said, well, this is what hit the books last quarter.
Yeah.
Why is your number so different?
Exactly.
We're counting different stuff. So and that's the way the systems work. Unless, going back to your Oracle days, unless you have an ERP that translates the two things together. But typically we don't.
Right. Yeah. Different song sheets. And so you're just singing different tunes almost the entire year.
Exactly.
Yeah, for sure.
And I'll jump in from the other lens. So as an operator, so if you're the head of a department, if you're a manager, you need to be able to triangulate across all of these different things, right? Whether across the employee life cycle, whether you're hiring someone, and you need to know what's your budget, what are existing employees making, what are the parameters for pay bands. Like you want all of that information. Or employees coming into your office and asking for a for a pay increase in a one-on-one, which never happens, right?
No,
Never.
you ask for pay cuts.
And then you need to triangulate performance on all this other information too. So, as an operator manager, and this is was my experience in my last several companies, is you need to be able to triangulate all of these different things. So what Chad is saying, finance software is just for finance and looking at it from one lens. HR software and comp and total reward software, each of those is looking at it from a specific lens. But decisions are multiplayer, and they require triangulating across all of this data, and it requires collaborating across all of these different people. And so that's part of I think the challenge there too. Everyone needs to be on the same page, understand at least the same language, even if they don't speak it, and be a bit more aligned. And so that's my observation there.
Well, the manager becomes the fulcrum, whereas the HR is on one side and finance is on the other.
Yeah.
And we can't ask the manager to make that connection point because they're in the middle. And they don't understand either. Sometimes some managers really do.
Yeah.
And to both of your points, I think what it comes down to is giving the manager just enough of the right information for them to be able to not only do the planning necessary and forecasting necessary, but also to make the best decisions they need, not just for today, but for tomorrow. We see a lot of organizations that are trying to make decisions for next year, 2 years down the road today.
Yeah.
And they just don't have the data necessary.
Yeah. And that's the other piece here is you often are hiring a headcount, right? You're hiring a button seat, like you said. And if you can actually bring in a little bit more information, an actual job title, the target compensation, the location information, like everyone just becomes immensely more informed as to kind of what the actual plan is and what the dynamics are. What are the different options if you're going to go more remote-based hiring and kind of have some flexibility there if you're really trying to get people centralized in a particular area. Like there's so many different things that you can build into it. And there's really no excuse. I mean, we have all of this data, right? Especially in the compensation space, we have a lot of this. If you can't reference a pay range for some sort of target when you're trying to hire someone, it causes a lot of issues on the recruiting side. So it does the exact same thing on workforce planning as well. If you just don't have that data accessible to you, it's not built in, and you're able to reference that, you're not getting the full picture of what you're trying to do for a workforce plan. And eventually you're going to run into some disconnects and some other issues down the road.
Well, before we get too fast forward on the other questions, I wanted to ask you just a really basic question about workforce planning, because we talk a lot about workforce planning.
Yeah.
Workforce planning is not just for the now, but it's for the future, right? And so we are living in unprecedented times of change and dynamicism in the markets, in the government, in our regulations. What is your version of workforce planning? What do you think of when we say workforce planning? Just to kind of set the ground rules here, because, and by the way, and the other part of this is who owns workforce planning?
Yeah, so great question. By definition of workforce planning, I think it is having the right people, and now in 2025 and beyond, the right agentic AI as well, in seat to be able to get the job done. And that is thinking about it from many different lenses, but just to kind of give a few things. One of it is, are you hiring the right skill set or buying the right skill set? Are they staying in seat? Are they doing the job? Internal mobility, along with budget, spend, and headcount, right? Like those output parameters that we touched on, David. Like finance ultimately still cares about, and for HR, is it the right org shape, the right structure, the right people in seat, span of control, all of those kind of things. So those are outputs to bound you, but ultimately, to me, it's do you have the right people and AI in place to get the job done, and to continue to get the job done. So it's like the full life cycle.
Yeah, but before we keep going, though, Harris, you bring up a couple of really amazing points, which I gotta touch on. it's about getting work done.
Yeah.
But now there's so much new ability to get work done through gig work, through agentic AI and AI, through people you hire, people you contract with. And by the way, not just in the US, but around the world, even though the political winds aren't there. But still, I could hire people around the world. Yeah. So my question is, is workforce planning now, this because it's this multivariate equation, it's taking on a completely new lens, because now you're not just determining the skills you need, but how is it being delivered? Is it technology delivery? Is it gig worker? Is it contractor? Is it hire? And where? I guess the question there is, how the heck do you manage all that?
Yeah, that's absolutely right. And I think that wave's been happening for a while, David, since the pandemic, actually. So it's not a last 12-month thing, right? Like we went from everyone's on major cities. Now it's even across the US, it's so much more decentralized. From there was a big wave of globalization. As you said, even with some of the wins, I don't think it's going to change in terms, because just people want the best talent and fast. And so there's maybe a little bit of a premium in some cases. But that's what it's a battle right now, to be honest, for the best talent, even in 2025. So I only see that happening more and more. So now multi-country, multi-currency, multi-geography, and you mentioned different employment types. So I know the stat in California, and I think for most states it's the same, is a third of all workers in California, for example, are 1099 or gig or contractor, and it's the fastest growing segment.
Yeah.
And the projection is that I think in 10 years, it's going to be 50%. So it's both employees want different work relationship. So there's a whole lot you can go in there, but that's great for employers too, because they can bring in hourly workers or contractors, right? It just gives you more flexibility to scale up and scale down your organization based off needs and demands.
Yeah.
So the HR leaders and the finance leaders and the operators of today is you have infinite number of options and permutations of how you shape your workforce.
And the reason why I'm smiling, and for those of you who are listening, you can't see me smile, is, and we're old enough to remember the days. I think all three of us, although I know Chad and I may be a little bit older than Harris. I remember the days where I got my first job through the New York Times want ads, the definition of offline. Yeah. Okay. I sent a letter, not an email. I sent a letter to the New York Times, or to the PO box that the New York Times had.
Right.
And now we're talking about hiring robots to do what people do. And you're talking about fully a third of work gets done, or up to a half of work gets done in California through gig work. The world is different, and we're only talking about, and yeah, I know where I'm saying this the right way, 40 years ago, okay? It's crazy.
Yeah.
It's just crazy. And that, I don't think people, especially people who are born since the millennium, they don't recognize the fact that that's a major change in how work gets done.
Right.
I'm not being nostalgic, by the way. I just can't in that space right now.
No, it's true. I mean, many of the systems that we're using were built at least 20 years ago, and many of them were not built for that level of integration and flexibility. But I want to go back, your point of the purpose of workforce planning is to get work done. I totally agree with that. That has not changed at all. I think how do you structure that? So every organization has the, day-to-day get stuff done, everyday work kind of stuff that needs to be done. There is always, though, at least for a lot of our customers that we're working with, they have initiatives that they are planning for. And especially going into next year, right now, Q4 is all about planning for 2026,
right?
Trying to understand what is it that we want to do differently that's going to grow the business, make us successful, all of those things in 2026 and beyond. And so to the extent you can sort of build parameters around an initiative that you're trying to get done, you want to build out in a new marketplace, a new country, those sorts of things, you have at least some idea of the kinds of jobs and skills that you're going to need for that. And skills is another thing where it's how do you identify where those skills need to be sourced from? What's important for you to have locally here at an office location versus something out in the field. Like those are all things that companies wrestle with already. And it's just a question of like, how do you put a system in place where you can actually share and collaborate and be able to work on all that information at the same time?
Yeah, it's a lot of work. And I know that's what leads to your platform. So I'm just going to say that and not try and sell it to anybody, but to say that there are systems now that enable you to bring all these things together. Enjoying the conversation? Don't forget to hit subscribe so you never miss an episode packed with insights and strategies. Now, let's dive back in. I want to kind of go back to your second question, though, because I think it does start to grow from where we're starting, which is what's workforce planning and what's the challenge, to now people use data to make decisions. Unfortunately, a lot of people aren't really that data friendly, or they're afraid of data. Yeah. But we need to use data to make decisions, especially in HR and finance. How can we actually leverage more of this data to be able to respond to these crazy shifts in business and crazy shifts in the market? Because they're happening at a breakneck pace right now.
Right. Yeah. Well, the absolute wrong answer is you do not rely on worksheets and try to keep everything managed in one place where, you've got maybe dozens of people trying to understand, like, how do we go about actually requesting additional workflow? I mean, you put the hammer on the nail there when it came to the manager being the fulcrum of all of this. They are the ones who know we need more people, and I need to know how I can best and most accurately request the right kind of people, to hire quickly, respond to market issues that are popping up, that sort of thing. And if they don't have that workflow to be able to go immediately and make that request and have that information flow really directly back to finance and HR and anybody else who needs to review that for approvals, like, you want to be able to have the approvals in place to be able to generate that additional headcount very quickly, respond to the market. All the data is there. It's just a question of being able to integrate it together and have that in one place. And then the workflow, as far as like who's going to approve it and all of that, that can be defined pretty quickly as well.
But I think one of the keys here is that finance is always asking for ROI. They're always asking for, what's the payback? And you're making a decision to either hire someone or explore a new technology that might solve for this skill gap. Mm-hmm. How do we create that environment where finance gets what they need to be able to get the ROI analysis from the data that you're talking about? Because the manager doesn't have that at their disposal, or they may not have the skills to be able to develop that.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a great question. You need a lot of different types of data. I think Chad touched on some of it. You might need things like revenue to employee ratio or cost to employee, some of the financial ones. But you also need a skills gap assessment. You also need performance and productivity and output of these different departments and how that's changing over time, whether with people or AI, et cetera, as well, and to be able to measure it, right? But ultimately, it is a combination of hard quantitative data, some things that you can measure, right? Like sales output or CS output is easier to measure. But then there's other things that are much harder to measure even now, like engineering output, a little bit trickier, right? David, you said if you're making big bets, some things are non-deterministic. Like maybe you need to go do research and figure out it's possible or not, especially the big bets, the greenfield bets, like going into a new industry or building a new technology or product solution. So you still have to, as an organization, create space to be able to do that, because even if you think about OpenAI, it was a research project, nonprofit for 6 or 7 years before it became what it became. I'm not saying you need 6 or 7 years for all research. Like sometimes it's days or weeks or a month. But you still have to create that sandbox for creativity, but then at least recognize it and understand it. And some of those bets work and some fail. But if you don't carve time for those, you're just doing what everyone else is doing.
And I'll go back to DARPA and the internet. and that was a pretty good bet too. And what you're saying is appropriate. And I think, Harris, one of the things that people are typically afraid of is the who moved my cheese and how does my life change, right? Yeah. And so thank goodness we don't have employees in the workforce planning project, and what I mean by employees is, every rank and file person, because sometimes we do that when we ask them to edit their job description. Yeah, that goes well.
Yeah.
But that's where I'm getting at, and I think you both have answered my question, which is that you have to be able to give the managers the right information and insight. You have to give them the ability to fail, probably, by giving them the ability to be innovative. But then again, you still need to get work done. And sometimes that means you just need to go the traditional routes. The reason why I keep pushing back on the ROI stuff is because when I was in HR and when I was building compensation programs, and I'm sure, Chad, you remember this too, we were always asked by the finance organization, how much does this cost me, right? And what's the bang for my buck here? Mm-hmm. And I've been coming at things a little differently lately and being a little more skeptical because of what's happening in the marketplace and because where we're seeing funds get cut back and people getting laid off and things like that. Yeah. And I guess one of the things I wanted to touch on next was, not to be all over the place, but talking about the world of layoffs and how do you go there? Because we're talking about ROI on lots of things and talking about ROI in terms of adding people. But what's the ROI on subtracting people? Where does that fit into all of this?
Yeah, layoffs is a really, I have a passion about it. I was laid off for the very first time when I had just turned 50, so just a few years ago, and it was not a fun experience for me. I don't think anyone wants to lay off people because of, what the impact on that person's life is going to be. And, many of us have had the opportunity to kind of go through that personally. So I don't think any of us are not empathetic towards employees. Will workforce planning completely eliminate layoffs in the future? No, probably not. I mean, but there are opportunities for you to realize the fact that, layoffs cause an immense amount of harm for the companies as well. I mean, there's lots of research out there that'll show dips or even just outright dives in company confidence, people's belief in future career opportunities, confidence in leadership. Like, those are all things that the rest of the employees that are actually
stayers
at the company, right? The stayers, they are the ones who all of a sudden you'll see the dip in productivity in a layoff as well. And so it's not a black and white removing a certain amount of cost from the business in order for us to focus more on other sort of like technology. It's a question overall of like, what is the company really trying to achieve? And one thing we haven't sort of talked about is the fact that workforce planning can be used for career development and giving people opportunities. We've heard of a number of different companies where you have that kind of internal job marketplace where you're not necessarily doing the traditional promotion route up, a single level every 18 months, 2 years, 3 years, but you're taking opportunities to work on different projects and initiatives. Right. And how do we move talent around in the business as much as we do bringing people in and then exiting them as well? So those are all different parts of a workforce plan that needs to incorporate, that level of flexibility. Hopefully that leads to more engagement and finance is not always, real keen on the topic of engagement as an actual ROI, but you see it in the productivity numbers eventually, for sure.
Right. Harris, can you talk a little bit about how you approach things like reskilling and upskilling? Because I think that's also part of where Chad was going with giving people opportunities and allowing them to grow.
Yeah, maybe this is a spicy topic, but I'm just going to go for it anyway. But there's two main things. One, I think we touched on was just the different employment types. I think gives a lot of flexibility to workforce planning, right? Whether it's hourly, contract, part-time gig, et cetera. And that gives both organizations more flexibility and stuff. So that's just one thing to call out. But I think with AI, a lot of things are changing. One is people will need to become more and more generalist, at least when it comes to the corporate world, because a lot of the tactical things that let's say in finance, a junior analyst or a comp analyst or a marketing copywriter, you can do a good part of it with AI, but you need people who are critical thinking, creative thinking, strategic, right? Like, and the relationship management, like the human aspect will never go away because humans want to talk to humans. But I think like part of the reskilling that's going to happen is is that. So like AI will do some more of the work, especially the menial work, and so you want people who can really think and innovate and like get the work done. But I think if you build those skill sets, there's a lot of roles you can kind of flex from, right? Like why can't an FP&A analyst do comp work, right? Like because a lot of the why can't yes, you have to understand a lot of the nuance. I know I'm stretching a little bit there, but there's a lot of jobs where you can leverage AI, and so it's more about the mindset and the skills, like versus like the experience. And I think that opens up the mobility a whole lot more, where people will want, at least employers will want more flexibility, so they can say, okay, we need to surge on sales, or we need to surge on support, or we need support on this thing. And people who can kind of adapt themselves, I think will do well. But I know that's my hot take.
Yeah, I get your point, and I think it is a spicy take to say that people need to become more generalist. I don't think that the bots are there yet, though, because an FP&A analyst looks at things in a very strict way, right? They have gap rules that they need to follow.
Totally.
Compensation people don't have these rules. I mean, we have some rules, but otherwise we're flexible. I mean, yeah, could that be a grade 9 or 10? Sure, it could. Whereas in the world of gap, no, that's a 9.
Yeah.
That's a 9. And so I've dealt with a lot of people who are migrating from finance to HR, and that aha moment when they get, oh, I can be more creative. Wow. Their mind opens up, and you typically don't see it the other way. You don't see comp people going into finance because you have to be trained to be there.
Yeah, you still need license certifications.
Yeah.
And you have to follow the rules. There's legal implications.
Yeah, exactly. Following the rules in comp is, make it a non-exempt, then you won't get in trouble.
Yeah,
that's how the rule works. So I like where you're going with this, though, Harris. I think you're right. I think eventually where things will happen with artificial intelligence is the engines will get better and the agents will get better, and we'll be able to be the, Homer Simpson at the controls of a nuclear reactor, sitting on a bunch of buttons that just make the thing work.
Yeah.
Whereas the bots do most of the work. We just make sure that it's the right work. So
I think there's still going to be a lot of room for differentiation. And, if I look at the last 20 years or so, as market data has just become more prevalent for many of our compensation professionals, we've gotten more uniform, right? Our solutions are very uniform in that we want to be able to connect back to the market as quickly as we possibly can. And my hope is we're in this moment where, we've got a variety. We've got more market data sources than we've ever had at this point. We've got some that are more traditional, the consultants that have been doing market data subscriptions for a long time, and you've got all the very traditional sort of job architecture, the way that they set up their levels, that sort of thing. But we've got a whole new group of market data that is, supposedly the real time measuring the market as people are offered positions and people accept offers. You get more of that real time view. So those are all different things that I think will allow us to just have more creativity in a way. It's sort of like, yes, we want to be able to have that stable kind of market data approach from the traditional providers, but there's lots of new things when we go out to hire a skill set that we've never hired before or anything else. We need new data sources to be able to see like what is happening in the market over the last month or a couple of weeks, just to be able to really look at that information as well.
And I want to pull on that thread a little bit too. Like just if we think about employees for a second, like their relationship with work has changed as well, right? Like versus us, any of us as well. Like they want more flexibility. They want different types of benefits and perks. Maybe more, like work from Bali or like more flexible vacations. Different kind of other benefits as well. Their expectations in relation to work is different. So. They don't want the same, here's your healthcare package and here's your dental and here's your vision and here's like a whatever $50 food budget or something like that, right? Like I'm overgeneralizing. And I think there's a lot like a battle for best talent again. And so as a comp professional, one of the things I think about is you can't have this exact same kind of generic total rewards package for people. Like you have to provide more flexibility. It has to be more personalized, hyper personalized on a per employee basis. So I think also some of the work is going to shift with AI and automation, and even in the comp space, it's can you, beyond the generic compensation and benefits, can you make it hyper personalized? Can you make it more bespoke? Can you provide more options? Can you meet the employee, in the middle somewhere? So I think the role is going to change.
Oh, sure.
From that lens as well.
Yeah, Harris, I think that's brilliant. I've been talking about personalization, and my friend Steve Brink, who used to work for Uflex Rewards, would tell you this, that there is definitely a market and definitely a need for hyper personalization. And now with the ability to talk to a bot and say, hey, I want to change my elections because my tastes have changed. I don't want healthcare anymore. Yeah, you have to, but I don't want my dental anymore because I just frankly never see the dentist. Or I don't wear glasses, so I don't need vision. And then a year later they might. So and I know I'm talking about elective benefits here. I think what you're talking about is, hey, I'd like to save more for the future, so I want more to go into like an incentive which is paid out at the end of the year, and then I can just put that into my bank account, or deferred compensation decisions or things like that. I think the only problem is that those have been traditionally held up by the legislation, the tax legislation around things like that. And Chad, you may remember this when, we used to, as a practitioner, I used to talk about deferred compensation plans. And, we were talking about elective, non-qualified elections that you have to make once a year for next year's pay.
Right.
Well, yeah. And then some manager or some executive says, hey, I don't want to do that anymore. And you tell them, well, if you do that, then it might bring down the entire company and cause us to get audited. So no, you can't.
Right.
So I believe in hyper-personalization, Harris. I think what we need to do is we need to have the government start shifting their viewpoint on taxation from being a once a year thing to being a more real time, because the laws are killing us on that.
Yeah. I have the unfortunate privilege of having 2 adult kids that are just going into their first few years of work, and having to explain why benefits enrollment happens the way it does, why taxes happens the way it does. I've been I say sort of unfortunately privileged, because I know how it works behind the scenes. I can't just throw up my hands and say, I don't know, that's just the way it's always been done. Like, I understand it, and it's it bores them to tears. It really does.
Course.
It's just like they have no idea, like really, like seriously,
no
like,
appreciation.
why can't this be? Why isn't this like TikTok? Why can't we just, order up what we want and have the algorithm do it for us and all the other things?
Well, I think to Harris's point, that's where people are these days, right? Their consumer experience becomes their corporate experience, so they want it to be. Yeah, it doesn't work that way. The only thing you can do is update your W-4.
That's right. Have fun with
How
that.
sexy is that, Chad?
Yeah.
We've gone in lots of different circles. I wanted to come back to one though, which is, you can never get away from this for too long on a podcast these days. I want to talk about AI and agents for a second, because they're becoming, and every podcast you listen to, whether it's the robots are taking over, you're going to lose your job and all that. I don't believe that crap. To your points, both of you had made on the podcast that on this episode, that people need to have skills around it, so that while they can be more of a generalist, they need to understand and appreciate how AI is going to impact them. So let's talk for a couple minutes about artificial intelligence and its impact on workforce planning, like very specifically on how is it going to change the way managers make a determination on who does what? Because we see a lot of companies talking about layoffs right now, moving toward AI. I don't know how they're making these workforce planning decisions today with where AI is.
Well, it's extremely expensive, I think, is what they're running into. There's a market for these tools, and that market, you can call it a bubble or call it whatever you want, but there's there's definitely a premium on the cost of bringing in those tools and capitalized expenses and all of those things. And so it's got to give somewhere. And unfortunately, that's, where a lot of the organizations kind of pull the lever is we have to unload a certain number of employees, tens of thousands of employees in certain cases, which is, just ridiculous. We've worked with a couple of CHROs recently who are taking a very thoughtful approach to this. And yes, IT, we haven't really mentioned IT as an organization yet, but they're the ones who should be running what's the strategy for the business? How are we going to use these tools? Those sorts of things. How do we incorporate it? So yet another group that's the CHRO and the HR team needs to kind of collaborate with in this space.
Right.
But there's the ability for them to, the CHROs that we've been working with will put it in people's KPIs. Like you are going to be measured on the success of your ability to utilize these tools in the future. And we're not saying just go out to ChatGPT and just start figuring it out. Like we're going to give you a plan. Here are the tools and some of the other, the reskilling resources that you're going to need for that. But you will be measured against your ability to incorporate these tools into your daily routine. And so that's, at least to my perspective, like I want those employees to feel sort of personally, enabled to be able to do that work and be able to adopt it, be able to make mistakes, because it's all brand new for a lot of people. And so be able to have that as part of your plan is not just the workforce planning side, but how do we actually demonstrate it from a performance perspective too?
I think HR and the leadership team needs to be the engine of change, right? So like we talk about like leading by example. Like if HR is using AI, they're creating the safe space to experiment and fail. I think that's really important. If you just say, here's your KPI and you must use this automation tool as an employee, then you're not really going to like be creative. You're just going to check the box, right? And that's really not the objective. I think so. There's a big role for HR in change management and creating that environment and reskilling as well. So like, yes, you see a lot of job descriptions now having requirements, and one of our customers saying they pay a premium for the same role. When they see certain keywords in the job description, which is amazing. There's some
Go figure.
Yeah, the go figure, right? But HR's job is for the people in place.
Yeah.
Give them give them the tools, give them the training, like so that they can do these things. So there's a lot of work for HR to do to be the linchpin in driving success. And then I think the other thing I want to call out is HR and leadership, finance, whoever, like a mix of people. We need to be able to measure how that's driving impact, right?
Right.
Is marketing automation making it easier for us to churn out higher quality blog posts and like measure all the way down? Like, because you said, you summarized it well there at the beginning, like workforce planning is still about getting work done. So like measure it. Like, is AI making it faster or better or more creative? Like, how is it changing? And measuring it and working on getting that better. Like maybe, day one or month one, it might not be. Actually, there's a bunch of things I can tell you that we intentionally don't do with AI, even though AI tools say, because it looks like some parts of coding, it looks like they're faster, but then they spit out bad code. So you have to, you have to be very thoughtful, right? And so you want to measure and track over time and like move those levers as an organization, both the productivity metrics, but also the cost ones. And to Chad's point, sometimes the cost is initially higher. It can be, certainly. And so, but you have to accept it. And that's where finance comes in as well, to track and measure those things. But yeah, ultimately you have to create that sandbox environment to kind of do this. And HR is very core to that.
And coordination. I think we're both saying that IT needs to coordinate this. They need to provide the sandbox. They need to provide the training. Because otherwise what you're doing is you're creating that KPI and you're setting them all up to fail.
That's right. Yeah, exactly.
Gentlemen, this has been delightful to talk to you about all of this. And I know I probably raised more questions in the minds of the people who are listening as well as my own. So I might have to ask you back to be able to go to round two. And my colleague, Dwight, who loves this space, will probably want to ask you a bunch of questions as well. So can I call you back again for another one?
Of course. Yeah.
All right,
It
cool.
was a pleasure, David.
Perfect. Well, thank you very much, Harris.
Thank you.
Chad, thank you for being here.
Thank you, David.
And thank you all for listening. Take care and stay safe. Thank you for listening to the HR Data Labs podcast. Don't forget to hit subscribe and share it with your network. Also, check out the HR Data Labs Brown Bag Lunch every Friday on LinkedIn. You can also check out the recordings on Spotify. Thank you, take care, and stay safe.